Excellent. So, hello, everyone. Um, Welcome to Let's Talk About Anything series. Today, we are going to be focusing on how to support your child with reading. For those of you who don't know us, we are Speak, Learn, and Play. We are a group of pediatric therapists. We have speech therapy, occupational therapy, mental health, play therapy, and social skills groups. Um, Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about how to help support your child's reading. Both Anna and I will give you a short, little presentation, and then we're going to open it up to questions. And we really hope that you guys take this opportunity to, ask us some of the hard stuff, some of your burning questions. Yeah, so here we go. You should have gotten a handout. Um, that both you should have gotten two handouts, one from Anna, one from me. My handout is more about, kind of how to identify reading difficulties, and some suggestions about what parents can do. But for the actual webinar, I would really like to kind of focus on just, supporting reading in general. And what most people don't realize is that you know, reading is language, and the basis for reading is oral language. So, the more you support your child's oral language, the more you're actually supporting their reading. And in the early years, right, infants all the way up, I mean, some of the best ways you can do that are by talking to your children, by narrating what you're doing throughout the day. Uh, my personal favorite that I do often with my own kids is go through the phone with pictures of what we did and talk about that. And of course reading to your children. Number one. And then as they get older, the best way to kind of support their reading is playing with words. And I think a lot of times, parents and even educators, and I think there's been a push, and this is starting to change, will immediately start focusing on letter names and letter sounds. But there's actually a whole other step that goes before that, and we call that phonemic or phonological awareness. And it's basically understanding that words are made up of sounds or individual sounds, and individual sounds can be combined with other sounds to make lots of different words. If you don't have, or if a child doesn't have an understanding of like a phonological awareness piece, and some of these things are like rhyming, identifying the first sound in a word, if they skip that step, reading can often be a lot more difficult. And for a really long time, phonemic awareness, it wasn't taught in the schools. And, in New York City, thank goodness that has finally changed this year, where they're doing a lot more phonics based learning. So I'm very excited about that. But as your kids are in preschool, before it's a little early to do like the letter sound, you can do a lot of like rhyming activities. Um, you know, little kid books are always, most of them have a lot of rhymes, so that's always great. But even like playing I Spy as you walk around the neighborhood, I spy something that rhymes with free. Um, and then you can even do that with, initial sounds, or I spy something that makes the t sound, right? And that will help cue kids in to the idea that sounds are important, and we need to hear and identify those sounds. But even like tongue twisters, a lot of kids will like to like change the first sound of their name, like Lucas, Lucas, Duke, and again, that reinforces the idea that sounds are important and words are made of sounds. And then as they start getting older, like 3K, or maybe more so 4K, and they're starting to learn their ABCs, I mean, then you can start teaching them letter names or supporting that, what they're doing at school. Um, and I'm sure Anna will probably talk a little bit about this too, but even like multisensory types of activities, like drawing letters in the dirt with a stick, like those can help reinforce um, a lot of that information in the office here. Lately, I've been using, I guess they're like know what you call them. They're not. It's not clay. They're you can mold letters, right? So we mold the letter and we say, oh, this is letter A, and A says ah. And then I usually personally follow. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Foundations, which is more of a commercial program, but there's a sequence in how you introduce the letters. And we sort of follow that sequence here, but it makes learning letters fun. And it helps support that. And you can do that at home with shaving cream, or anything really, as long as they're getting like the practice of, getting some tactile input, moving, and also listening and hearing, um, those sounds. And that helps with the decoding piece. And then, as kids learn to decode, and you're reading to them as much as you can, we come to the comprehension piece, right? So that's a little bit different. But, comprehension is, understanding what you have read. And typically, most kids who have trouble with learning to decode will have difficulty with comprehension because they're spending so much energy trying to figure out what the words are saying that they kind of are missing the meaning. And that's okay. I mean, it happens, but also, sorry, it's the phone ringing made me lose my train of thought. But in terms of comprehension, you know, not all kids who have comprehension difficulties have difficulties actually reading the words. So some in the early years, wow, they're reading, like they're so good, they can read all these books. And then they get to like third or fourth grade, and then, it becomes a little bit harder because now there's more of an emphasis of comprehending what what they're reading. And some of the best ways to support comprehension at home is really about making connections between what you are reading with your child and things that have happened to you during the day. Oh, this reminds me of a time where we did X, Y, and Z. And also building background knowledge. The more background information, the more exposure to different experiences and topics that kids have, it preps them better for reading about a variety of topics. And there's lots of ways to do that at home. It doesn't mean you have to go everywhere and spend a bajillion dollars, but there are virtual field trips. You can make sure that the books that you have cover a wide variety of both, stories and, nonfiction stuff. And other ways are like wordless picture books. Having your kids make up a story based on the pictures will help them get a good understanding of story structure. Making predictions is also great. As you're reading, oh, I really think that this is going to happen and this is why, right? And also helping with, and generating inferences. I love reading mysteries and trying to figure out the clue. And as I'm reading, model the thought process of how you got to that inference. Well, I saw this clue and this clue, so now I think this. And asking WH questions, but not so much like, what is this? What does this say? Or what did this character do? But more like why and how questions. Why did you think this happened? How did the character solve the problem? Can all, it gets kids talking, right? Building their oral language, but also solidifying that literacy knowledge. And then, yeah, the other thing is you could also have kids extend the story once you're done reading. Do you want them to have, make a sequel, or should we give an alternate ending? And if your kids, talking about these things is a little too difficult, draw what happens next, or you can make your own character. And again, all of these things will kind of support your kids' comprehension and complement what kids are, what your kids are learning in school. So I am going to hand it over to Anna, who is going to talk a little bit more about the visual components and how that impacts and supports literacy.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna. I'm the OT within the practice. And I just wanted to explain how visual skills affect daily activities in your child's life, how they can improve independence if you support these skills and support reading. So there are three groups of foundational vision skills. The first is visual perceptual skills. The next is visual motor skills, also known as eye-hand coordination, and then ocular motor skills. So there are so many different types of visual perceptual skills, and we're working on them um, constantly when we are playing different games with our kids. So, for example, visual memory is targeted during a memory game. This is the skill that allows us to record, store, and retrieve information. It allows us to learn and later recall what is learned. Another example of a visual perceptual skill is visual form constancy. So, this allows us to distinguish one object from another similar object, being able to tell the difference between the letters B and D, the numbers 3 and 8, which sort of have visual similarities. And if you know the game Spot It, this skill is targeted when playing that game. Another visual perceptual skill is visual figure ground. This allows us to distinguish, segregate, isolate, or find an object or stimuli in varying environments. So think of Where's Waldo? You really have to sift through something that's very busy to try to isolate and find this small icon. Another visual perceptual skill is called visual spatial relations. So this allows us to process our visual environment around us and the location of objects in relation to ourselves. So if you look out the window, can you tell which building is closer to you? Another one is visual closure. So can you detect and differentiate and draw conclusions when there's only partial pieces of information visually provided? So for instance, if you see a picture of a butterfly and it's partially erased, can your eyes and brain fill that together to help you understand and conclude that it's a butterfly? Um, Visual discrimination, if you've ever seen those spot the differences into pictures exercises. So being able to see the similarities and differences in shape, color, position, orientation. Um, and then the next category of foundational visual skills is visual motor skills. So eye-hand coordination, using our hands and eyes together for smooth movements for tasks like writing, drawing, coloring, cutting, catching, throwing, so many different things we do every day. And lastly, there's ocular motor skills. And these are the skills where if you've taken your child to the ophthalmologist before, they're assessing these skills. So fixation is the ability to hold your gaze directly at an object. An example of this would be focusing on a teacher instructing in the front of a classroom. Saccadic motions is when the doctor says, look at this light, look at this light. So it's jumping to a different target without overshooting or undershooting. And when we read, we use saccadic motions to jump between words or the next line. Visual tracking is the ability of our eyes to smoothly follow a target. So an example of this is when the eye doctor tells you to follow their pen with both eyes, not moving your head. Convergence is the ability of our eyes to move inward and to maintain fixation on an object coming closer. So when the doctor says, look at my finger as it moves closer to your face. And lastly, there's accommodation. So the ability of the eyes to adjust as an object gets closer or further away. So an example of this would be a student reading text from a board far away and looking down at their paper to copy text. So when I conduct an initial evaluation with my clients, I always do a vision screening. And if I suspect there are vision problems, I always refer to a developmental optometrist who not only works on the ocular motor component, but they also work on visual perceptual skills, like I mentioned, and eye hand coordination or visual motor skills. And I often collaborate with developmental optometrists to carry over these strategies taught in vision therapy. And sometimes children might not be the perfect candidate for visual therapy vision therapy if they have attentional issues and they have a hard time sitting still. Um, and then in that case, I sort of can take over temporarily until a later time when they might be ready for vision therapy. So there's a lot of overlap. Um, because of course there's so many daily activities which I want to work on gaining independence for my clients through. And if there are underlying visual impairments, it's really important that I target these so that my clients can be independent in their daily activities. Um, so, for example, if a child has a convergence insufficiency, if they have a really hard time bringing their eyes together as moves closer, they might have a really hard time manipulating things up close, like fasteners, playing with toys close to their bodies. Challenges with visual perceptual skills affect handwriting, the ability to do puzzles, drawing. Challenges with visual motor skills affect cutting, catching, throwing, tying shoelaces. And then visual inattention can make it difficult to write, color, or focus on any task that's not automatic. Challenges with visual tracking can make it hard to play sports or keep your place while reading. And so I wanted to segue to how vision relates to reading. So actually, when I heard about the statistic, I was really blown away. An estimated 25% of children have an undetected vision problem that impacts their academic performance. And sometimes these children are misdiagnosed with a learning disability, ADHD, or dyslexia, when they actually might just have a problem with eye tracking. So vision relates to reading in that saccades, that one of those ocular motor skills, which allows your eyes to jump between words. You know, obviously, if your child has trouble with saccades, they're going to be skipping words. Visual tracking allows you to keep your place while reading, preventing word omissions also, and obviously that impacts comprehension. Um, Visual attention is required to sustain attention to the text, of course. Um, and then convergence is important when reading up close. Visual form constancy, the ability to distinguish between letters that look similar, is required for early readers. And so some signs of potential visual impairments are reading below the grade level, confusing similar words, writing words, numbers, or letters in reverse. This is common when children are first learning to write letters, but it can be indicative of a visual impairment. Reduced attention span while reading, frequently losing their place while reading, writing, or copying, omitting or rereading words or sentences, poor reading comprehension, rubbing or squinting eyes when reading, complaining of words floating or moving on the page, tilting their head while reading, leaning very close to a book or TV, experiencing eye strain or headaches when reading. And so there are so many different activities that work on these foundational visual skills, but some ideas, suggestions you can do at home to support vision are puzzles. They work on so many visual skills, visual perceptual skills, eye-hand coordination. Um, any crafts involving cutting work on eye-hand coordination, playing Where's Waldo to target visual figure ground skills, the game Spot It to work on visual form constancy, finding the differences between two photos. memory matching games, playing catch, visual closure worksheets, which you can find online. Um, but if you do suspect that your child might have some underlying visual impairments, I really recommend reaching out to a developmental optometrist. There's really not so much awareness on this field, and they can be really, really helpful for improving academic skills, reading, um, and just overall independence. So yeah, I wanted to open up the floor to questions. I know I just went through a lot of detail, but we're happy to answer any questions.
No questions, but I mean, this all makes sense, right? What you're saying. But, when you have a child that struggles with, different areas, it's kind of hard to kind of like narrow it down, right? You guys know Madison very well, right? We have gotten her eyes checked and, there's no concerns with her vision, but as you know, her attention span, her sensory, right, kind of gets in the way of some other stuff, right? Too. Um, so I know, for us, what works for me is, I tend to kind of read the same books for her. So she does recognize some words, but my thing is like, does she just recognize it because is she going by memory or is she really putting those sounds together? Like, that's the stuff that I struggle, right? Because I mean, she's got her favorite books, but and she knows, right? She knows what comes next, right? But how do I tell as a parent that she's really like reading this or is it just a memory kind of thing for her? Oh,
Jen,
I don't.
you're on mute.
I'm
Yeah.
muted. Sorry. Um, no, that's a great question, and it's hard. Most kids who read books over and over have memorized them. So the best way to sort of tell is to try and um, try a new book that has a similar sentence pattern, right? But has different words. I don't. What's her favorite book, Giselle?
Really likes the Pete the Cat series books.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that those are great. And yeah, see if you can. I'm trying to think. If she has a favorite one, maybe switch to a different one and see if she can figure out what some of the words are. I mean, and we do need memory for reading. I mean, there are words, sight words are words that don't necessarily follow like a predictable spelling pattern. So those actually do need to be memorized. So her memorizing words is not the worst thing. But yeah, we do want to start getting her ready to hear some sounds. And I might even do like a rhyming book with her. And I don't remember, just Pete the Cat, they don't rhyme, right?
No, no.
No. But something with some rhyme and then have her sort of finish it, right? Like you don't read it, let her see if she can come up with the word. So I would try that, and I would try even just trying to think what she would like and what's going to keep her attention. I think anything with sensory will help. So if you want to know if she's figuring out sounds, maybe trying you know like tracing some words and see if she can put the sounds together. Like if she's tracing like at and doing cat. Sometimes they make things like the letters that kind of bubble up a little bit. So they're little tactile support, or you can do it with, I mean, you can probably make them with, I'm just trying to think. We used to have, I don't know if they still make them. You remember the candies that were like really long and they were like dots and you pull them off a roll?
Oh,
Like,
okay, okay.
you know what I'm talking like,
Oh gosh.
you can make letters using that kind of thing, and it's
Okay.
bumpy, and you get the tactile piece, and you could even start with her name, right? So what's the beginning sound in your name? Let's trace it, right? And that's how you'll start being able to tell. If she can link the letters to the sounds and then start putting them together, then yeah,
Okay.
that's kind of where it starts. And we can talk about that and how we can work on that in our own sessions. You can
Okay.
talk with
Thank
Becca
you.
about it. No, great, thank you.
I have another question. Hi, it's Lisa.
Hi, Lisa. How are you?
Good, good. How are you?
Good.
Um, for kids who already struggle, like with speech like heavily, I guess he's in pre-K. Like, what age? When should I start working on reading and recognizing? I know they're trying to recognize letters at school and
Mhm.
everything. But like, what's the best strategy? I know he's gonna struggle. Like,
Mhm.
what can I start with from now?
I think playing with words and playing with sounds. And he's like the phonemic awareness piece, right? I'm a big fan of like things that rhyme. And then having him listen for sounds. You know, what does your first name start with? What does your brother's first name start with? What sound does mommy's name start with? Right. So that's how you start it. When you're on the playground, oh, you want to go down the slide. Ooh, what does slide start? You know, and you can do a sound as you go down the slide. Like all of those things will support his eventual learning to read and the things that he's doing at school. But again, and as I mentioned, jumping from just starting with letter names and letter sounds, you're skipping a whole foundational step. So I think anything that you can do with sounds would be great for him. Um, yeah, uh, because and I know he might fight learning about letters and stuff a little bit. So this might be kind of like a fun way to kind of get him interested in words. And again, the same thing, like, you know, having him, you know, use the multisensory piece. So if he is learning already letter names and letter sounds at school, like have him make it in the bubbles in the bath. And especially for him, he's going to need probably more you know, the fine motor will be hard for him, but if he can do
Yeah.
things in a gross motor way, right? Like making a C really big in some bubbles, I think that would also be helpful for him.
Okay. Thank you so
Yep.
much.
You're welcome.
And I always like your suggestions. So you mentioned this game Spotted a lot. Is that like something I can find on Amazon?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
When I see her today, I'll see how she responds to it. It's it's really hard. Like adults can play this game and it can really take you a while. Um, but I'm curious. I'm always trying to work on and targeting different visual perceptual skills with her. Um, but I'll try it today and I'll see how she responds to it. But I think that we could even, downgrade the challenge by making the pictures bigger or having fewer images on each card. And if you're picking her up today, I can show you what I mean by that.
I won't be there today, but I'll be there Wednesday.
Okay.
So, okay.
Okay. So I'll touch base with you then after I introduce it today.
And then one more, you didn't mention it, but I I have heard, do you think a scratch pad would be motivational for Madison to kind of get that OT and maybe having her start tracing letters like on a scratch pad? You know that those
What do
scratch
you
pads,
mean by a scratch pad? Like an
just
Etch-a-Sketch?
like the scratch patches now that like you can, draw on them, but they have like different colors so that I can
Oh,
get,
yeah, yeah,
like
yeah.
with
I
like a
know what you
stick
mean. It's
to
like a
kind of,
wooden stick to, like to
right.
wipe aw to kind of scratch off the, black. Yeah.
Right, like, if I show her, like, the letter M and, I mean, I know she can't trace, right, but I'm starting to get her to maybe is it too soon? Like, would a scratch pad kinda help me support her?
I think that having her use a utensil to, kind of trace is a bit challenging for her at this time. But I
Okay,
do think that, a sensory component is super important for her, but maybe like zoom out and have it be a little bit more gross motor rather than fine motor. So like using um, like rolling pieces of Play-Doh to help form letters. Or I have these wooden letter blocks that I've used with her in the past to construct letters. So like zooming out instead of holding a utensil, like using her whole hand to form letters. I think that would be better
okay,
for her.
okay,
I'll show you those Wednesday too.
okay, thank
Yeah.
Hey, this is Shauna, Eva's mom. I missed some of the beginning, so I just want to make sure it's okay to ask questions.
Of course.
Okay,
Please
great.
do.
Um, w Eva's going into kindergarten. We had our IEP meeting, and one of the IEP goals, which I think is like standard, is to identify like I forget how it was worded, a certain number of sight words by the end of kindergarten. And so I was sort of just like wondering if like even pursuing her like memorization of sight words, if that's like
Mhm.
counterproductive to encouraging reading for someone who is also struggling from like a speech sound standpoint, and if I should like perhaps ask for that to be removed from her IEP or let it kind of hang out there.
Yeah. So the thing about sight words, right? So they're considered like irregular, right? They don't follow the patterns that we expect to see, even though English itself is about 80% regular. So memorization has to be a part of reading. It just is. And it's not, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. We have to do both for her, but I absolutely think that like she can get there and I think that's a great goal for her. I don't know how many it is, but again, like for having her practice, like gross in the bathroom, in the sand, and writing those words, tracing the words on the paper. One of the multisensory techniques that which is a little more abstract, probably not for her, but like skywriting, right? Where you pretend that your arm is like paint and you're writing the sight words on the wall, like anything that's going to give her more than one modality in practice will be helpful, I think, for her. And then you need to know sight words for reading. So, and I think they'll be helpful.
Yeah, I was forgetting how that worked in a piece of memorization. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, you can't memorize everything, right? You do have to learn the rules about how sounds go together, but you can memorize. It's okay. And I think that'll be helpful.
Okay. We were gonna start like looking at sight words the same way, like multisensory approach that you've been
Yeah.
talking about. But like, oh, should we not be doing this and just focusing on like sounds, like first letter, all the things you spoke about, like first letter name sounds, playing with words.
Yeah. We've been doing that here too. But yeah, I think that if you're pointing out sight words in the books that she's reading, I mean, I know you guys are reading all the time. She loves cooking, right? And she loves like if you have a recipe and you point to the word, right? Like this is what this means. If you make it around things that she's really into, I think she'll respond well to it too, and that's totally okay.
Okay, great.
This is a tip for the parents. My daughter's a little bit older, but I remember like when we were trying to teach her letters and just sounds, even like on driving, like we would put like music in the car, right? And like A is for apple, apple. So, it's just a tip for the parents that, for the kiddos that are in pre-K, like, don't think some of these activities you got to like do isolated at home, right? Think about it like if you're in your car and you're going on a long drive, play a YouTube video for them, play a song. If you take them to the supermarket, right? And you know that they can identify with the A, you can say, "Hey, look, what's that? Apple, B, banana." So, just keep that in mind because, that used to help us a lot, right? A lot of the times we would just take advantage sometimes, even if we were like on the subway of just, carrying some flashcards around and saying, "Hey, Madison, point to this," or "Let's look for this," So again, just keep those things in mind.
No, I think those are great tips. Thank you. And when we talk about things that you can do at home, it does sound like it's an isolation, but I think Giselle is right. The more you can do it as part of their everyday environment, these moments where you're in the car, you're on the subway. The subway is great for pointing out letter names and so with all the stops. Um, so yeah, absolutely. And just walking around your neighborhood, you can do any of these things anywhere. You just have to get used to like get in the routine of it, I think. And thinking about it. But thank you. That was so helpful. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Um, so I guess like I have two. The bigger one. How
Yeah.
do you differentiate about like laziness for reading or just not hating reading and an actual difficulty reading? Because I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like he's fine. He can read. He just hates it.
Mhm.
And sometimes I feel like, okay, maybe because he's dual, he speaks French as well. Maybe that gives him a harder time than others. I just, yeah, I just can't figure out.
That is such a great question. And I can't tell you how many parents we have who initially come in and they're like, he can sort of read. I just think he's lazy. He's not, or she's not putting in the time. And I think I think you know your kid better than probably anyone else, right? So if this feels unusual to your kid, like normally, he's excited about school, likes learning new things,
Mhm.
really loves picture kids who really love picture books and like comic books, or usually it's about how hard it is. I would say that like 95% of the kids that we see who the parents are like, I think it's lazy. It's there's some struggles, and the struggles can be minor. Some kids just need a little boost, and there could be something as significant as dyslexia, which sometimes goes unnoticed until like second or third grade. But I would suggest always erring on the side of caution. And if your child is struggling, ask the school to assess them. Get a consult with someone who specializes in this, and they'll be able to kind of let you know if it's laziness or if it's like it's really hard. But usually, kids who say it's boring, boring usually means hard is what we find. So if a kid is like it's boring, most likely it's probably hard.
Okay.
Yeah. I know because I know your son, I would say that he wants it to do it really, he wants to be really good at reading. And I think he's motivated. And I think he just needs a little bit of a boost. I don't think it's the influence of French. I do think that sometimes it with his spelling a little bit, but I think he just needs like to be taught a different way. That's it. And then
Uh-huh.
once he kind of breaks the code, right? And that's what happens. Once kids start getting confident, they break the code, then they just like shoot for the stars. And then, you'll start noticing like he'll be picking up books more and less picture books kind of thing.
Yeah.
He'll want to start reading Harry Potter.
Oh, yeah.
Just
Like he
just
moved up a level. Thank you.
yeah. Oh god, I'm
Last
so
week.
happy. Yay.
Does anyone else have any other questions? No? All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Next month, we will be doing a webinar on communication disorders and anxiety and sort of how those two kind of go together. That will be with Amy and myself. We hope to see you there. You can rewatch the webinar. You can go to our YouTube. There should be a link to YouTube. Oh, actually, yes. I'm sorry. You will be sent a link, and you can rewatch. And if you have any other questions, please always, feel free to reach out. You can reach out to the Speak, Learn, and Play email, or I believe you can probably contact us also individually from there.
Can we send the link to people we know to watch the
Yeah.
webinar?
Please do. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Thank you so
Right.
much, everyone. Thanks for
Yeah,
those thoughtful questions.
you.
We hope it
Thank
was
you.
a helpful and informative session.
Yes, thank you. Have a good afternoon.
Thank
Our
you,
pleasure.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.